this month, I thought I'd finally put some more effort into polishing up the world in Drifto. Starting with the Toge, it's the first stage and has been around since the initial release. Before I started on creating more content, I had a few things to fix up. First was these lines all along the road. It turns out these are just mesh faces that should have been invisible as they're actually underneath the road surface. They weren't there for any reason other than I hadn't removed them yet. Task 2 was to make the back wall a little bit prettier. I ended up replacing it with a couple of cards and some cones. I also made a variation of this for all the other stages. I then spent some time fixing up these messy corners, resulting from the turns being too sharp for the ground meshes. This was a little tedious, but well worth it. And finally, I created some more road pieces. My road generator works by taking these preset sections and stitching them together to make an infinitely long road. Kinda like the Pipeline team building game. The first new piece I decided to try out was a car park. Since I wanted the road to be horizontal, it wasn't as straightforward as I initially expected. My workflow around the use of smooth curves had to be thrown out the window in favour of more regular shapes. Then, once I had added the textures and some cars in the car parks, it was done. During this time, one of you reached out and suggested a gas station piece. I started by looking around for models already made, but nothing seemed to fit right. So, I copied the base for the car park and got into modelling the building. She's a bit rough, but does the job well enough. At this point, I wanted to affect the gameplay a bit more. I was thinking about how to change the road from being a constant width, and the tunnels just outside of Kaikolda came to mind. They were perfect. To make it easier for me, I started by making only one tunnel. And after just blocking it out and putting it into Unity, it was really fun. But there was a big problem. Because the walls are so close, the camera clips through them a lot. And while this is a problem I will fix in the future, it's not a problem for today. So I saved what I'd done and moved on. The Indusso. This stage is the worst offender in terms of level design. The intention was for a dull, gritty, industrial area inspired by Australian drift culture. What I've got here is none of that. It's bright, cheerful, and clean. Ew. The original Need for Speed Most Wanted had the look I was after, so I started by playing around with the post-processing effects trying to replicate the look. The result is a combination of colour desaturation, increased contrast, and an orange-yellow tint. It was a really good start, but the stage still felt too friendly. I removed the footpaths and replaced them with rounded curbs and brought up some windows. Now it felt just the right amount of uninviting. At this point I was happy with the changes, so I got on to creating a new road piece. A few of the members of the Discord server and I link to join in the description, came up with the idea of a four-way intersection that loops back on itself, and sure enough, after blocking out the general shape, it felt good. During my research, I noticed that there are often larger empty spaces in common areas, not just crowded bland buildings. So I thought I'd do something different from the rest of the Indusso pieces and give lots of grass space. The result is a break from the crowded nature of the rest of the stage, but still brutalist enough to add to the vibe. The last stage I had time to build upon was the rally. Aside from the new back wall, the only changes I made here was adding two new road pieces. The first one is very similar to the already existing slight curve, but with a lot of banking and a barrier on the outside. The second is a bit more interesting. Inspired by this clip, it incorporates tarmac into the rally stage, changing up how the car feels for just a moment. Changes to the world in Drifto aren't all that's been happening. One of the big differences between this and the last update is the lack of leaderboard. There are a few reasons for removing it, the biggest being the inherent restrictions it places on development. Any changes I make to the scoring system have to be made very, very carefully, or the scores on the leaderboard are rendered impossible or immediately overwritten. Neither are good outcomes. I've made this change now, even though there aren't any scoring changes in this update, as Firebase, the technology I was using for the leaderboard, refused to let the game compile. I literally could not create the update with it. Another big roadblock I faced was my MacBook dying. While I use a Windows machine for development, to compile any program for an Apple device, a Mac must be used. So I finally knuckled down and set up a CI/CD system with Unity Cloud Build to get around this. Now, instead of spending 2 to 3 hours every release, including beta releases, I can now click a couple of buttons and forget about it. And it wouldn't be much of a Drifto update without bug fixes. I fixed cars floating at max suspension length sometimes, the ability to use cars not owned, and made the settings button visible on dark stages. The final change, which I am super excited about, is the music. Mystery has done a phenomenal job of creating the custom soundtrack for Drifto. It's so good! Links to Mystery's YouTube channel and Discord server in the description, as well as in the new credit scene of the game. That's all the changes for this month. Thank you for sticking around. If you'd like more insights into what's happening with Drifto on a more frequent basis, come join the Discord server. Also, take a peek at No Bones and his newly released game, Grab The Goblins. It's a nice break from the faster paced gameplay of Drifto. Once again, thank you all. Subscribe to hear when I upload more devlogs, and feel free to strike up a chat in the comments. Smell you later.